Two, and we're live. All right. Welcome, y'all. Sean Marshall in the house. You guys, if you're tuning in for your first time, this is the Your Relationship Reignited Summit. And we're going to take a little bit of a different spin on this conversation. And I think that no matter what stage that you're in, it's going to likely apply to you. But we're going to direct the conversation more toward a newer couple who's in possibility. Is this the right fit for me? Are we going all the way? But there's some red flags. I don't know. So we're going to direct it there. And I do think that it'll help you even if you've been in a long-term relationship. We may still hit on some of the stuff that carried over that you didn't address yet at your wedding. So that being said, Jonathon Aslay, man, did I get it right?
You got it right, my friend.
All right, man. Welcome back. I'm in possibility. Jonathon was here for a summit I did at the end of last year. Great conversation. You shared some amazing stuff that what I'll likely do when I share this, I'll probably link that interview too, so they could watch the original because we talked about a lot of good stuff in there too. So welcome back, man. Thanks for coming.
I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, grateful. Well, I'm gonna put the spotlight on you for a little bit. You can introduce yourself, share a little bit about what you're up to in the world, and then we'll just wrap.
Okay, really quickly, folks, and I don't want to belabor this. I'm a dating relationship coach for women in midlife, which I always say is after baby making years and before retirement. The reason why I focus on that demographic is I'm a divorced man in that demographic, and I recognize that for 75% of singles over 45 years old are most likely divorced. And divorce comes with it, this unraveling of the tapestry of our life with another human being. And to connect with someone new, I think it's really important to reintegrate oneself into their sovereignty, into their me, if you will, before you start to become a we with someone else. And so that's kind of what I lean into in most of my conversations.
Yeah, I remember and you have children. I
Yeah.
remember one of the things that you told me last time we spoke is you start after the divorce, you're like, all right, let's get it together. You start dating. And I remember you went on a date with a woman that had just gotten out of a long-term relationship yesterday, and she was
Yeah.
on the dating. So you said, yeah, let's wait 6 months and pick this up again.
It's interesting because, yeah, in that moment, I said, look, I mean, if you literally broke up last night and you're on the dating apps, I think you're jumping in too quickly. And she kept reassuring me, no, 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 I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. I'm like, I don't want to roll the dice in this particular case.
Sure.
And it's because, and it kind of leans into this conversation that I've been fascinated lately, is how much do our past experiences have residue for opening up to a new experience? And it's very difficult to parse that out, from a logical point of view. I mean, like, yes, our relationship didn't work out and blah, blah, blah. Logically, it's over, but emotionally, and I use the term residue, our past experiences, our past hurts, our fears of maybe surrendering to, and I use the word surrender, but opening up fully to another human being, being in partnership with another human being, it can cause us to have this, for some people, it could cause them to have a wall up from an emotional, intimate level, but certainly it can cause us to feel cautious. And why I wanted to talk about this in the concept of reigniting your relationship is that, if we don't, or at least this is my invitation, let me say this. If we don't look at our fears, our past hurts, the residue we have, and at least work on healing them, it's always going to be a block to love in the future. Doesn't mean you have to be healed from it, doesn't mean that that residue doesn't exist, but it's going to be there. Are we working on healing it, or are we just stuffing it away and pretending like it doesn't exist?
Hoping that the new partner would just magically fix it like a magic eraser.
Yeah. That's another fascinating thing. We oftentimes as human beings think, well, that new person will resolve all of our stuff.
Hmm.
And actually, what I'm finding even fascinating in my own life, because at the time we're recording this, I've been seeing someone for about 6 weeks. This is the farthest I've gotten with anybody since my last relationship, and all of my stuff is bubbling up. It's not there's this irony that when you meet the right one, it's just going to be rainbows and magic, and it's just going to be fairy, angels singing in the background. No, actually, what I'm finding, at least for myself, is my stuff is bubbling up to the surface. And I think most humans don't really know how to regulate their stuff, their emotional stuff, I mean.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I mean, I got married right before we did our first interview. So I'm still new to
Yeah,
marriage, if you will, my
yeah,
first marriage. I'm 44. My wife
yeah.
is the same age. No, I mean, she's 34, of course. But I've been in personal development for 15 years, and
Yeah,
I still notice it's like the concept doesn't matter, but like I notice too, there's stuff in marriage. We committed, we're doing it. I still notice that there's little, as you say, residue that comes up,
yeah,
the little flash of something that happened in a past relationship, where I'm like maybe anticipating that she's going to do the same thing or whatever.
yeah.
So that stuff always, I think that, I don't know if always, but seems like it can follow you, forever. So what do you,
Well, well, that's a great point. It can follow you for the balance of your life, that sort of thing. And I don't think we ever, erase, our past. It's part of our scripts. It's part of our programming that makes us who we are today. And even, you know, I was going to say the other thing I'm butting up against is that space of freedom versus being in partnership. There's this surrender that must happen, because on some level, not that you should lose your sovereignty and autonomy with another person, but there's a shift from a me to a we. And there can be, you might be butting up against those experiences even when you're in a fully committed relationship. There's going to be a time where you're going to go, God, I just want to be me, like, and not even have to think or worry about or pay attention to someone else for a day or two or three. And I know John Gray will talk about, well, men need their testosterone levels, recharged, and they need to go into their man cave. There's certainly some elements of truth to that. But at the same time, these are the real facts in a relationship that I believe part of the reason why a relationship needs to be reignited, because in many ways, the foundation wasn't built with radically honest communication about how we're
mm,
feeling at any given time. And and again, a feeling in a moment doesn't mean it's a feeling for a lifetime either.
I'm with you. That's powerful. I'm gonna put you a little bit on blast here on Spotlight.
Okay.
If you don't want to go into it, that's totally fine.
Okay.
Maybe the girl you're seeing is gonna end up watching this, so I don't know if we want to have that conversation. But
By the way, I no, I we can absolutely go there.
yeah, okay. So you said you're bumping up against your stuff from the past. You're 6 weeks in. Are you in possibility right now that you and her go all the way? Like, are you in that discovery phase that like maybe this is someone I go all the way with, or where are you at in that relationship right now?
Well, this is a great question, because I operate as what I call a grower builder. So I've identified three people who are actively dating. Um, 20% of the population are what I call are users. They're the love bombers. They're the entitled people. They only care about themselves. They're in it for their own needs. And by the way,
Okay.
this is not a fact. This is just an opinion when I say 20%. And then
Okay.
about 60% of the population who's in the dating marketplace, they want companionship, they want connection, they want sex, but their capacity to commit, or their desire to commit, their vision to commit, is very weak. It's a very weak
Okay.
desire, capacity, or vision for commitment. And I call them spenders, because they'll spend time with you, you know, but it doesn't mean that they're going to be able to fully commit to you. And
Okay.
then there are the what I call grower builders. These people are they know they want a life partner. They've got their act together. They have good relationship skills. They have a level of emotional maturity, and that's probably 20% of the population. And Sean, this is purely hypothetical. So it's just
Oh
a
yeah.
simple bell curve, if you will.
Yeah, this
Um,
isn't Stanford statistics on
yeah.
relationships, but like just some like basic guess from what you've seen.
So I'd like to think I'm a grower builder. In other words, I'd like to think I have good communication skills, good emotional maturity. I know I want partnership. But what's fascinating to me at this moment is I'm butting up against, do I really want partnership? Like I said, I wanted
Mm,
commitment. I believe that's what I want, but it's interesting because I'm with someone who's actually causing me to go, is that what I really want? You know?
yeah.
And that's what dating is. It's a fact-finding experience. It's a vetting experience. That's what, it's because I think it's a fallacy and a fantasy to think we just automatically go all in with somebody right away, that love at first sight, that sort of thing. I think love is something you build and it's a choice, not necessarily. I mean, I'm just aware of it from a secure way of approaching love, not an insecure way approaching love, like love it, like insecure love attachment style. I think there's an intentionality versus an involuntary, you're just in love. I don't know if love is involuntary, like it just happens. Now, these are things I'm observing and processing and talking about, partially because I'm going through this experience.
Yeah, I'm with you, man. Yeah, it's interesting. So you called in as somebody who's 20%, if you will. She seems ready, she's serious.
Yeah.
And then you're bumping up against your own what you thought was your intention, which was to, bond up with somebody, if you will. And now it's like, huh, is this, I got somebody who wants that, and do I really want it? And I remember it's interesting because we talked about your son who was in a relationship
Yeah.
who was like bumping up against you, and you're like, hey man, give it another 6 weeks, give it another whatever, and work through it. How do you sort through this on your own now that you've had this like little inkling come up that's like, I don't know yet actually what I want to do? Do you bring that up with her, or is it too early to bring that up with her? Do you
No,
continue to date her?
yeah, I've actually been up very radically upfront from the beginning. I believe in transparency. And let me just be clear, because on some level, you know, I recognize that this could cause a complete retraction on her part. But
Sure.
these are thoughts. They're not and I said to her right up front, these are thoughts. These are not statements of fact. They're just, these are fears, insecurities, thoughts that come up. But what the overarching experience that I'm feeling with this person is immense gratitude and appreciation.
Mm,
She's kind, she's caring, she's loving, she's generous, she's intelligent. We have a physical connection. So I'm I'm in such immense appreciation that all of these little things aren't causing me to derail or sabotage it or want to pull away. I think it's because I'm aware of these things that I'm actually, it's almost as if, Sean, because I'm objective, like I've pulled a step back and I go, well, I see this happening. I'm not going to let it overrun me.
yeah,
Like is like when you're unconscious to it and you're not objective to it, those fears and insecurities can drive the bus. I'm
sure.
not letting the fear or insecurity drive the bus. I'm just aware of, it's like more like, well, I see potholes in front of me. Okay, I can dodge around them versus just falling into them, kind of thing. Um, and why I'm bringing this up is because most everybody experiences it would I would be shocked that two human beings connect. They're 6 weeks in, they're 12 weeks in, and they're not butting up against their stuff, you know? And it's also our fear of abandonment, our fear of rejection, our fear of making a mistake. All of these things are there in our consciousness or our subconscious for sure. And so coming back to what I shared in the beginning or a moment ago, because this relates to your topic of reigniting. By operating with radical honesty, by being authentic, by being transparent, by being vulnerable, it's the building blocks of intimacy. And reason why many relationships need reigniting is they didn't do a proper job of building emotional intimacy, because they either allowed the chemistry to drive the bus of the relationship, or the
Mm.
fantasy of what this amazing connection is. I don't know how many people go, oh my God, we have the most amazing connection on the planet, yada, yada, yada. But the truth is, you're going to butt up against your stuff at some point. So building emotional intimacy is building trust with another human being. And when you've built trust, where your trust to me isn't just about fidelity, trust is this other person's best interest or my best interest. That's the way I view trust, is like I'm always looking out for their best interest because it's in my best interest. And when two people operate from that, then they have the foundation to building deeper emotional intimacy with one another.
I can hear people saying right now, I get it and I love it. I can hear somebody saying, I do that. I give everything. I make it all about him, and he doesn't reciprocate it, back to me, like kind of classic people pleaser, if you will.
Mhm.
What do you, in dealing, like, you kind of give the framework of the three, 20%, 20%, 60%, the users, the spenders, the
Spenders.
builders. I don't think there's a set, hey, you have to be single for this long or whatever, but in somebody's case where they just got out of a relationship and they're jumping back on dating apps, that right before the breakup happens, if you will, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but how do you walk somebody through that when they come to you and they're like, Jonathan, I want to find love, and but they're like also just wanting to perhaps fill this void of, I feel lonely, or I just need some needs to be met or whatever. How do you decipher that with them to kind of have them see honestly where they are?
So that's a great question. And one of the things I do for my, with when I'm working privately with a client is having them look at their past relationships and ask yourself, what positive things about myself did I learn in this relationship? In other words, come at it from a very affirmative healing space. How have I healed from this relationship? What was good? What am I most grateful for? By looking at your past relationships, not from a place of bitterness, not from a place of anger, not from a place of victim consciousness, and that's not to suggest a person might not have been in a relationship that was abusive or toxic. I'm just saying, look at it from the merits and the positive aspect of your past relationships, and how have I grown from this experience, and do I feel like, so I used the word residue earlier, but I'm going to
Yeah.
use a different term. I'm going to use a battery for a moment. Do I still have a charge from this past relationship? And I'm
Mm.
thinking, if you ever seen a battery meter, like the green is the good, like it's high charge, and the red is low charge. If you don't have a charge from this past person, then you're probably ready, or at least capable, no, not capable, but at least you're probably ready to begin a relationship with someone. If you still have a lot of residue and charge and anger and bitterness and jadedness and contempt and defensiveness for the other person, and criticism, then that's going to bleed into any new relationship. At some point in
Mm.
time, it will rear its ugly head. Um, so those are some of the things I invite people to look at. Um, Because, and here's the thing, Sean, one size doesn't fit all. The advice, folks, for the advice you're listening today, you know, and the many others on this summit, it's like I'm inviting everyone to parse out what resonates with you, because this thing called, by the way, can I curse?
Dude, say whatever
Okay.
you want,
Okay.
man.
So,
Absolutely.
so I jokingly say, do you know why it's called dating?
Okay.
Because in the dictionary it used to be holy fucking shit, trying to figure out another human being is insane. So so it got replaced with the word dating, and
With
I'm
the
saying
word
this tongue
dating.
in cheek. And even a
Sure.
relationship is much the same. um and so I believe that if we can operate from the most consciousness going in, we build a much stronger foundation to build on a relationship as it grows.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah, I like your invitation
Okay.
because it's very easy to listen through a filter.
Yeah.
Listen, let me take what Jonathan's saying, put it through a filter, and then, make my new partner wrong for, what he's doing or not doing. I
Yeah.
think we have to be super aware that we're not looking for seeking evidence to support an old pattern when that pattern hasn't worked. So I think that's really important to parse out and make sure that you're not just tricking yourself with what you're getting from these conversations.
By the way,
Um,
can I piggyback on that one for a second? Because
of
I'm butting
course.
up against that big time. So
Yeah.
in my last two significant relationships after my divorce, which was almost 20 years ago, I had an insecure attachment with both of these women. I had an anxious attachment, and they most likely were some form of avoidant. Most likely. I mean, I don't want to I mean, I have my diagnosis, but that's not their diagnosis. Okay.
Sure.
Um, and so what's interesting is with this new person, it's radically calm.
Mm.
And because of that, I'm totally like I'm a deer in the headlights. Like, okay, wait a minute. This is calm. That doesn't feel like my past was, anxious, and I thought that was love. So I'm like, wait a minute. This is calm. Like, that's not love, because love is supposed to be like erratic. So it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting to witness this duality. And I'm like, okay, well, you know, by the way, this is really good. Don't screw it up because it's not chaotic. So it's just an interesting experience that I'm going through.
Very interesting, man. Yeah, it's that whole idea of the familiar. Sometimes we seek the familiar because it's comfortable and it's known, even when the familiar isn't good for us. And so like
Yeah.
maybe there's some aspect of familiar, and I have that too, man. I have that. There's
Yeah.
certain things that happen around the house from past relationships that I'm like almost catch myself on edge. Like, is she gonna get mad about this? She never gets mad, ever. Never complains, never bitches, never. But there's that little voice that's like, she should be dramatic about this, or she should be
Yeah.
chaotic. Like, you should throw something, or like stand in front of me in front of the door when I'm trying to leave, block me and yell. It's like, but no, that's not here. That's not what's happening right now.
Well,
Um,
coming back to this conversation, and I want to lean into for a moment those more seasoned relationships that have been
okay.
around for a while and they're struggling to connect with one another. And I believe that this is a very common experience. And it's interesting because, and you intimated that it was the women who tend to want some more emotional connection, and the men are a little bit more reserved in that area. I think it's important to really sit down with your partner on a regular basis and saying, are we meeting each other's needs and having a real serious conversation about this? So if like one partner wants physical intimacy and the other doesn't, it seems like we have to be martyrs in relationship. And I'm not here to advocate, a relationship of martyrdom, you know, but at the same time, I think it's important to have these conversations, whether it's physical intimacy, whether it's emotional intimacy. And I like the work of Allison Armstrong,
Yeah, I've had
because
Allison on the
she
show a handful of times.
okay. So Allison has a program she started with called Understand Men, and it was helping women understand men, much like the way my work is mostly for divorced people though. Um, was that she would put together workshops with, like 50 or 100 couples. And some of the men probably went there a little bit, like they had to be, dragged in a little bit.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I've sat in these groups, and it's interesting to witness the way Allison frames the conversation to help men understand what women are going through and help women understand what men are going through. Because I think oftentimes our struggle in relationship is we don't put ourselves in the other person's shoes and going, what are their needs? What do they want? What do they want to experience? And being in a relationship with someone who says, okay, I want to meet your needs. Do you want to meet? And vice versa. And by going to couples workshops, I'm a big proponent of couples doing this or listening to summits like this as an example, and doing it together with your partner, not just one person listening to this and going, okay, I'm going to teach everything, but having two people listen to this and go, hey, how can we grow together as a couple? Do we want to grow together as a couple? Unless, because remember I said 60% of dating is just placeholder relationships. A lot of
Yeah.
couples are in simply a placeholder casual relationship. And if you want something more than that, then two people have to be intentional about it.
Yeah, and this drums up for me. I've had conversations with former clients who, I'm not a dating coach. I've been trained as a dating coach, but it's not the way, and as a relationship coach, but that's not the way I'm positioned.
Yeah.
But it comes up, dating, love life comes up, health comes up, business, all of that comes up. And I remember I had a client who killed it. She was in a government job. I
Yeah.
helped her at double like the GS level that she was in government. So she doubled her income as a result, killing it in that way. She's doing well with health, doing well with like the platonic like family relationships in her life. And then so I asked her, I have my clients rate themselves in different domains of life.
Yeah.
And so it was on a scale of 1 to 10, and she rated her, it was like a 9. She rated it a 9. I was like, that's freaking incredible. I think we were at like a 3 or something when we started. Like, great job. And then I thought about it, and I was like, we haven't, I don't want to pour salt on this celebration, but I was like, we haven't talked about your relationship in quite a while. And the relationship was like not great.
Yeah.
And what she had done is, because she was so used to the relationship not being great and sort of like settling for where
Yeah.
it was, is she actually removed that from the calculation and then gave
Okay.
herself a rating, but kicked that part out. So it was like, I'm a
Okay.
9. And I was like, well, what about the relationship? And then it was like, oh yeah, the relationship. Well, that's whatever it was. It was a low rating. And
Okay.
I just use that to illustrate how easy it is to settle for what is, and maybe not have an expectation or a vision or a dream of it being something different. Or like, if you're not used to having those deeper conversations like you're suggesting, like partnering with your partner, I love that suggestion. I want
Yeah.
to have my wife do this, but I don't want it to be like, you're here to listen to me, do these conversations. But it can be challenging, or it's vulnerable, or it's vulnerable position to bring that stuff up with somebody if you're not used to doing that. So I think there's like a learning curve that has to have some practice that has to happen just to be able to start having those conversations. And I think it's easy for us to express our needs, perhaps,
Yeah.
and be honest, but maybe not as easy, like you suggested, to put myself in somebody else's, my partner's shoes. Like, what are their needs? And be receptive to hearing feedback.
Yeah. This reminds me, and by the way, thank you for that illustration or giving that big picture of what both your clients and even in your own life. I think one of the big questions that might need to be answered is, for number one, is why do I want a relationship?
Hmm.
And we'll even take it a step further. Why do I even want partnership? Why? And really know your why. Like, why is it, other than, yeah, I want companionship, I want connection, I want sex, but what's your deeper why? And everybody
Hmm.
has their own deeper why. And some of it is based on insecure, unhealthy components. I mean, I mean, throughout history, to some degree, from a throughout history, women have been dependent upon men for survival. So there's almost this blueprint that already exists for hundreds of thousands of years that makes them more apt, not always, but just more apt to want commitment more than men. Um, that's not always the case. I'm just saying, generally speaking.
I'm with you.
But so really get to your why beyond the dependency and beyond the programming and the script, okay? But the other question is, I want to take it to another step is, okay, two people are in a relationship. What's the purpose of our relationship? Like, what's the real purpose?
That's a great
Now,
question.
it's interesting because I'm a tail end baby boomer Gen Xer, and most of us that were raised in that period of time had a blueprint. It was, graduate high school, go to college, get a job, meet someone, get married, buy a house, start a family. Like that was the blueprint. And it was such an ingrained blueprint throughout society. And the purpose was making babies and raising a family. So the relationship's purpose was actually centered around something greater than the whole. Okay. And what happened around the 70s, roughly the 60s and 70s, here at least in the United States, was a proliferation of divorce. I mean, a gigantic
Hmm.
explosion of divorce. So it was no longer about making baby and raising families. It was about our individual sovereignty. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, it's good to be a sovereign human being, but I'm not happy in this relationship. And we saw this explosion of divorce. Okay. And here's the tricky part for that demographic that I speak to. Most of us, since we're beyond that baby making years, beyond that raising children, or at least, you couple with someone new, what's the purpose of our relationship? Is it going to and does that mean we take on each other's, luggage, if you will? We take on each other's life. I mean, now this gets even more complicated. Like, do I want to go all in with this person that already has, and I'm using the term luggage, not baggage, okay? But it used to be called
Okay.
baggage. But this is just luggage. Do I want to take on this person's luggage if I'm going to go travel with them? And I think what couples don't do a really good job is like, what's the purpose of our relationship? Are we just spending time with each other? Or are we going to grow as a couple? And if we choose growth, if we say, okay, I'm looking for not just a companionship and sex, I want to grow with you, then it invites, or at least I'm inviting everyone to go seek those resources. There are so many couples workshops and books and things to help you grow as a couple, both as an individual, as a couple, to strengthen your relationship. So you don't need reigniting. It's always being reignited. Like, in other words, every day is Valentine's Day, not once a year kind of thing.
I love that, man. Yeah, I love that. I'm curious what you think about this. Like maybe there's a model. There's a model that I was taught. Do you know Sylvia Badashi? You brought up Allison. She's kind of like cut from the same thread as
Okay.
Allison, but she's not in the spotlight either. She's like as
Okay.
great, but she like more closed door.
Okay.
Um, I remember she's who I get trained on relationships through, and she said, because when you're talking about growing together, I
Yeah.
think from my experience, one of the things that I've seen if I'm working with somebody who's been married for a long time is they kind of collapse into a unit, like one unit. But then what happens is they've put their own needs aside for quite a while, unintentionally, and then they wake up one day and they're like, I haven't, whatever, I haven't had my needs met in quite a
Sure.
while because it's been all about the relationship or the
Yeah.
household. And then like I'm saying in a woman's perspective, but then on the other side of that conversation, the man feels the same way. And like a model I was taught is that a marriage becomes three entities, where it's
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So it's like, and I'll say this for the audience too, but it's like the marriage is one unit, but then the
Yeah.
man or whoever, one partner is a part two, and then one partner is part three, and we're each like we have to work on all three.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing you say is we've got to figure out a way to work together, come together, partner up. Okay, but in your perspective, how can you keep that? Like you've used the word sovereignty a handful of times. I love that word. How can you keep the sovereignty and the freedom and have my own ambitions or whatever, but also prioritize like us together and check in? What are your thoughts on that?
You know, I'm going to
In
say this
seven
is the
seconds.
billion-dollar question to some degree,
Right.
and because I mean, in truth, I could say some sort of pearls of wisdom, but I mean, I think it's more complicated than that. And what you described is the way I always say that there's the me, there's the me, the them, or the other person, the other me, and then there's the we, that's collective. And so I think one of the things that's most important is to regularly check in with oneself from an introspective perspective and go, what are my needs in a relationship? Like, really ask that, to really look inward and go, what do I need? And it's not about what you need the other person to do for you, because it's often always, I need you to do this so I can feel good about myself. No, find out what need is missing. Is it closeness? Okay. Is that a need? Is it verbal expression? Is it appreciation? Is it physical touch? Is it intellectual stimulation? Find out what that need is. And there might be multiple needs. Okay, is just identify what you need for yourself. Now, here's where the fear comes in. Okay, I'm going to express my need to my partner. They're going to run away. Well, if you make a request for a need to be met and that person runs away or wants to end it or whatnot, then are you really in the relationship of growth?
Hmm.
And I get that, we certainly, for those that are, have children and assets together, and there's a meshment between the two, you might want to be reluctant to open up to these because you have a meshment together. At the same time, if you don't speak up, resentment is going to creep
Hmm.
up, contempt is going to creep up, and all you're doing is burying your emotions and your feelings for it to implode at some time in the future. So start by identifying what your needs are. And I'm a big proponent of couples to have regular check-ins with one another. Like the state, don't wait a year to have a state of the union of your relationship. I mean, that's not what anniversaries are for. I'm here to encourage regular, if not once a month, not once a week, at least once a month, checking in with each other. What do you need? Ask your partner, what is your needs and how can I fulfill those needs?
I love
Don't
that
I mean,
question, man.
start by knowing your own needs first, if you're going to ask that question.
Well, it's a powerful distinction to say what are my needs, but to not say what do I need from this person? What do I need from my
Yeah.
partner? I need them to do this. I need them to do that. It's not about that. I think that's unhealthy. I just want to paint that. You said that, but it's really important to get intimate and separate yourself from them and not make it about what they're not doing for you or for me, and just say what is it that I actually need, and then get clear about that and figure out a way to say that and have that conversation without it being like you're not doing this, because then we're
Yeah.
just gonna you're gonna get defensive, and that's gonna be a problem.
And at the end of the day, a relationship, I mean, whether we like it or not, it's very rare that two people are so identically aligned with one another that there's almost no friction. I mean, we're going to have differences. And first, if there's a difference, you might first have to go, well, do I tolerate this difference? Um, I'll give you an interesting that example that's coming up in my new relationship is, though,
Okay.
I'm a morning person and she's a night owl.
Okay.
And it's interesting because I like waking up at 5 a.m. and she probably likes to go to bed at midnight or 1 o'clock. Okay. So,
Yeah.
okay, so let me tell you where this disconnect lies. It's actually, I love the morning and quiet by myself. So I mean, on the nights that we've been together, I actually love that. That's not the issue. It's that I tend to crash like around 9 o'clock at night and she's still like ready to go for a couple hours. So this is a disconnect. And at first, it took a little bit of tolerance to kind of navigate this. But what happened very quickly is we met a state of understanding each other. We have this difference and we understand it. Okay.
Okay.
We understand where the other person's coming from. And we're not trying to change the other person. We just understand it. Well, to really reach the first layer of love, I believe, is accepting these differences. Like, okay, I
Mm.
accept, like she accepts this as me. I accept that it's her. She understand, like right now, she's understood that I've couple times I hit my wall at like 8 o'clock at night. I literally am physically am fatigued to go any further. So she understands that. Excuse me, now we're reaching this place of acceptance. Ultimately, I think love truly resides beyond acceptance is when we can appreciate our differences and even adore the differences. Like if we can reach that level of, okay, I get that's who they are and I adore them for it. Like that's really a state of love. I mean, but if at
Wow.
nothing else, we don't reach a place of acceptance, boy, a lot of times when it's just tolerance, there's a lot of resentment, there's contempt, there's criticism. And if your relationship is stuck, it's usually because you haven't reached a level of acceptance for that difference.
I think that's powerful, man. Yeah, the judgment. Hey, you should be a morning person too, or no, you should be a night person too. Why do you go to
Yeah.
bed so early, old man? Or why are you up so late? What's wrong? Like all this resentment and I mean, excuse me, not resentment, resistance around who this person is right now.
Yeah.
That's a big problem trying to change them. And I love what you say, not only just not accepting it, but the vision is how can I get to a state of adoring this about this person? That's powerful.
Yeah.
How
Yeah. I think that's really where the deepest form of love resides is when you can look at a difference and go, okay, I accept it. I accept it. May not be what I want, but you know what? I'm going to accept it because if you don't, you're going to be butting up against, like I said earlier, contempt, criticism, judgment, all those things, resentment. But imagine you can actually go into a place of adoration for it, or at least appreciation for it. And ultimately, what I'm observing, at least in my own life, but this is what I observe with happy couples, their appreciation for the other person exceeds their fears, their doubts, their hurts, their
mm,
pains, their judgments, their differences. In other words, I think one of the most powerful forces in the universe is appreciation and gratitude. And it's the gratitude for the person in the whole because we're going to have these little micro differences, right? You know, and I know I am guilty of what I'm about to say. I can look at a micro difference and be so freaking fixated on that.
yeah,
And it takes taking that step back and going, wait a minute, look at this wonderful human being I have. All right. So they eat their peas with a fork. I'm using a Seinfeld line, you know?
sure.
um, you know, it's, learning to appreciate the whole of a person. Now, that doesn't mean to be a doormat. If there's a boundary that's been crossed, if there's a real issue that hasn't, that needs addressing, then it's hugely important to doing that. But at the same time, I believe it's important to look at the big picture. And sometimes that small stuff, like who wrote the book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff? Like that's the
Mm,
way relationships should be viewed at from my vantage point anyway.
that's high level, man. That's really high level because it's putting your judgments aside, not necessarily your needs, but allowing yourself to love, at a really high level and like allowing yourself to see somebody for who they are and appreciate who they are rather
Yeah.
than nitpicking and tearing them apart or causing problems where there doesn't need to be a problem.
Well, you just said we're at high level. You know, it's interesting to me because we no longer need a relationship for the most part from a dependency place. Okay. I mean, thankfully, women are empowered now that they're not dependent upon men. I think that's one of the it's such an important part of our humanity that we no longer come from a place of dependency. We come from a place of really joining up, you know, from a growth perspective, if you will. But I'm going to tell you something. Relationships are not for the faint of heart. I mean,
Hmm.
most emotional discourse, okay, most of our emotional discourse, I mean, certainly we have family where there's discourse, we have friends where there's discourse, there's coworkers. But boy, nothing triggers our shit like romantic relationships. I mean,
Yeah.
heavy duty triggering shit all day long. Okay. And it's this ain't for the faint of heart. You know, like if you're not ready to roll up your sleeves and go, I'm willing to get into the mud, you know, and not that relationships need to be gigantic work either. Let me be clear. It shouldn't feel like it's so overwhelming that you're constantly working on it. But I'm talking about butting up against the work is really the inner work to
Hmm.
overcome our own shit. And if two people are working on their own shit, if you will, their fears, their insecurities, their doubts, their judgments, their resentments, their criticisms, you know, and if you're not work, that's the work. It's our own internal work. So it doesn't affect that, remember that union we talked about, that we, or at least it doesn't have as much impact on the we when you're
Yeah.
doing your individual work.
It's powerful. You also said something too. I'm noticing myself fixated on this. You talked earlier about, I know we got to wrap soon, so we'll wrap in here in a couple minutes. You talked earlier about 70s, the 70s, which is
Yeah.
not that long ago, 50 years. The
Yeah.
divorce rate shot up, which I really hadn't thought about that. It wasn't in my awareness necessarily until the early mid 2000s that like everyone's getting divorced. But yeah, you're right. This started back then, which just makes me realize I haven't had this discussion yet. I'm probably very ignorant in how this all plays out and works. But in a larger, in the grand scale of humanity, we're in the infancy stage of being in relationship in the way that we're approaching relationship now, like in the way that we're having it in this conversation of what are your needs, what are my needs, what's the goal of our relationship. Like this is really brand new. It's brand new. I mean, in some way, we're kind of fumbling through the night, the darkness of the night, trying to
Yeah.
figure out how do we come together and build a life with somebody when the original piece of like we're dependent on one another is out. All that's out. And now it's about partnership, like almost like you could say two equals, if you will, coming
Yeah.
together. I don't believe in half with two wholes coming together, and now we have a whole together. So I just think that
Yeah.
that's fascinating that that's where we're at.
Oh, I could piggyback on this, and I only because I know we're limited on time. I want to
Okay.
just emphasize we are in an evolution right now, or a revolution, if you will, on human pair bonding from a completely different vantage point for so many different reasons. Um, particularly coming back to the why and why do I want a relationship and what's the purpose of a relationship. But what I also find fascinating is that we now see more singles in the world than ever before. In fact, we probably, I would say of age appropriate people, there's half of people are single, not coupled with somebody. I think we're in an evolution also of our building our individual sovereignty within humanity. In other words, is that it's unique that so many TikTok videos and YouTube shorts and Instagram reels are all about personal development and inner work on childhood wounds and traumas and adult traumas and that sort of thing. I think we're in an evolution in humanity where building our individual sovereignty is the real what's going on. And so the next evolution of relationships in the future will be more whole people coming together as we individually work on ourselves.
I hope so, man. This opens up a whole conversation around technology.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of conversation that's been had recently on some of the bigger podcasts that are highlighting the porn industry and how that
Yeah.
has impacting all the dark side of that, but also how that is impacting us in relationship, where you're watching this act that was never meant to be something that you're watching, like
Yeah.
you're not even in it. And then with like sex robots, there's this whole like new market of people that are, there's some insane movies around this where a guy has a relationship with AI, you know? So
Well, the
anyway,
movie Her with Joaquin or
yeah,
Joaquin Phoenix. Yeah.
that's the one
Um,
I'm thinking of.
yeah. And so, I mean, God, we could go down that rabbit hole. And
Totally.
to some degree, I think what's most important is there can be a lot of judgment over that experience. But this is the evolution. This is what we're going through. This isn't by accident. I think even dating apps and swipe apps and all these things are opportunities for individuals to work on themselves. And so, coming back, because you said it's not 50-50, it's two whole people. And we're never fully whole, by the way. I mean, we're
Sure.
a work in progress. But ideally, if you're working on yourself, they're working on yourself, and two people decide, hey, I want to be in a relationship to grow as a couple, to grow as an individual, and to be part of your support team to do that. I think those are the relationships that have the greatest potential for more, I'm going to say happiness, joy, contentment, that sort of thing.
This is gold, man. You share some great stuff today, Jonathan. I appreciate it. I'm gonna,
Yeah.
and I know the audience does too. When I send this out, I'll link you're gonna give a gift. I'll link that for you. But I want to make sure I give you a moment too to chat, just to plug the gift and tell people what they're getting.
Sure. So this gift is for those early stage relationships. It's called the dating vows. And it's
Okay.
basically a half a dozen agreements you make with a person. If you're going to become physically intimate with one another, you've decided you want to maybe explore a relationship together. They're just a couple agreements that you make with each other early on, to determine if at least if we're on the same page, and I know this goes against a lot of the traditional norms because it's better to be silent and ignorant and just pray that magic fairy dust will make your relationship work. And
Of
I'm here
course.
to advocate more radical honesty from the very get-go to see if you're on the same page. So it's called the dating vows. Okay.
How dare you, man? Like my genie in the bottle, you're saying is not going to do it for me, and just hope and
No,
wish that this thing
magic
doesn't
fairy
work
dust ain't
out.
going to do it for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, Jonathan, man. Hey, I appreciate you being here, sharing your wisdom. I got a lot out of this
Yeah.
conversation, so I trust everybody did as well. We'll see you
Likewise, my
soon. And
friend.
all right, see everybody at home. See you guys soon as well.